My eyes snapped open, and I was 18 again, leaning against a school hallway glass mirror fixing my hair. The familiar scratch of cheap school uniforms, the chatter of students panicking over college exam scores, the faint smell of chalk dust hit me all at once. Before I could process the disorienting jolt of 2 lifetimes crammed into my teenage skull, Zhou Rongqi's voice cut through the noise, sharp and weighted with 80 years of buried resentment, nothing like the soft adolescent tone he should have carried at this age. Fang Taichu, don't pretend you're clueless. You've come back too, haven't you? I twisted around slowly, one eyebrow raised, sizing him up. His face still held that sharp, handsome edge that had convinced my father to recruit him as a contracted family asset all those years prior, but his posture reeked of unearned arrogance. He'd been a dirt-poor mountain kid my family fully funded from high school onward. Tuition, housing, daily spending cash, a signature watch I tossed him on a whim back when we were teens. Every single resource he'd used to build his corporate empire in our first life traced straight back to my father's endless bank accounts, a fact he'd buried deep in his delusions of self-made glory. I didn't bother answering his question, just rolled my eyes, a tiny gesture I'd repeated thousands of times throughout our 80-year marriage. The movement alone confirmed every suspicion swirling in his head. His shoulders relaxed like a weight had lifted, a wild, triumphant grin splitting his face, and he stepped closer, voice low enough only we two could hear. I won't dance around the truth. For 80 years, I carried the guilt of hiding Minmin, Jiang Ximin, my childhood sweetheart, as my secret lover. You got to play the untouchable wealthy wife with every luxury imaginable for 8 full decades. This lifetime, the tables turn. It's her turn to live the easy, spoiled life you hoarded all those years. I bit down hard on my tongue to stifle a laugh, studying the faded fabric of his school shirt and the beat-up sneakers on his feet. He had zero independent capital, zero connections outside my family's network, and he thought he could discard the sole foundation of every success he'd ever tasted just to play savior to his white moonlight. What made it even more ridiculous was the full context I carried from our past life. Jiang Ximin had died young at 30, her prolonged medical care entirely funded by money Zhou Rongqi secretly siphoned from Fang Group accounts. Every expensive imported drug, every top-tier specialist consultation, all mine by right, yet he'd framed it as a debt he owed her. Finished your little speech? I asked flatly, shifting my backpack strap higher on my shoulder. His jaw tightened, thrown off by my total lack of hysteria. He'd spent 80 years assuming I clung to him, that the marriage contract binding him to my family meant I was desperate to hold onto his affection. He'd imagined I'd beg, scream, or break down at the thought of losing him to Jiang Ximin, but I'd never once cared about his petty infatuation. The marriage had been a business arrangement to me. He maintained the public image of a powerful, devoted husband to prop up my family's reputation, and I got unlimited freedom to live exactly how I pleased without anyone nagging me about settling down. I never loved him, never relied on him emotionally, and I certainly wasn't about to chase him down now that he volunteered to walk away. Don't act like you're indifferent, he snapped, reaching out to grab my wrists. I pulled my arm away instantly, the cold disgust settling heavy in my chest. I won't be controlled by your family this time. The engagement's void, and I'm turning down all your financial support. I'll build a life worthy of Minmin with my own 2 hands. Sure thing, I replied, sarcasm thick in every syllable, and offered him a fake, bright smile. I sincerely wish you and Jiang Ximin a lifetime of bliss. No hard feelings from my side. I turned and walked away before he could respond, ignoring his shouts about how I'd regret letting him go. Halfway down the hall, I pulled my phone out and dialed my father's number, the call connecting instantly, like he'd been waiting for word from me all morning. Dad, Zhou Rongqi also retained all his memories. He just told me he's cutting ties to run off with his childhood sweetheart. A beat of silence hummed through the line, then my father's calm, unshakable tone filtered through the speaker. He'd seen every flaw in Zhou Rongqi the day he'd scrawled his signature on the permanent labor contract that locked him to Fang Group, $1 monthly salary, 0 personal assets, all housing, vehicles, and high-end spending owned exclusively by our family. He'd always known the boy's ego would implode the second our financial safety net vanished. Terminate the engagement immediately, freeze every bank card, revoke all housing access, seize every item we gifted him. I'll send a driver to pick you up within 10 minutes. No loopholes, no second chances. Perfect, I said, hanging up and slipping my phone back into my pocket. I wandered toward the classroom, ready to watch Zhou Rongqi's public self-sabotage unfold, and heard the teacher's booming voice echo through the open door before I even stepped over the threshold. Silence, everyone. Our class produced this year's provincial top scorer, Zhou Rongqi, a perfect 732 total points. Admissions representatives from Tsinghua and Peking University are already en route to meet him. The entire room erupted in gasps and cheers, every head twisting toward Zhou Rongqi's desk in the back row. He sat rigidly upright, his face schooled into practiced humility, but the glint of overconfidence in his eyes was impossible to miss. This was the exact moment our original timeline had shifted. My father had rushed over that afternoon with formal engagement paperwork, lifting Zhou Rongqi out of poverty and straight into the upper class overnight. This time, he planned to reject the golden opportunity entirely, all for Jiang Ximin. The teacher rushed to his side, hands shaking with excitement. Zhou Rongqi, this is a once-in-a-lifetime shot. Both elite schools are offering full scholarships and priority major placement. What's your decision? Zhou Rongqi stood slowly, letting every pair of eyes lock onto him, and delivered his calculated, dramatic line without hesitation. I will decline both universities. I'm enrolling in the same junior college as Jiang Ximin. Her exam score only qualifies her for that program, and I refuse to leave her behind. The classroom went dead silent for 3 full heartbeats, then exploded into chaotic chatter. Shock rippled across every face. A provincial champion throwing away the country's most prestigious academic opportunities just to follow a girl to a low-ranking private college was unthinkable to every student there. Jiang Ximin ducked her head, feigning bashfulness, but her fingers twisted her uniform skirt in barely concealed delight, drinking in all the attention Zhou Rongqi's grand gesture had pulled toward her. The teacher's face drained of color, stepping forward to reason with him. You're throwing away your future over a fleeting teenage crush. You'll spend decades regretting this choice. It's not a crush, Zhou Rongqi retorted, his voice raised to carry to every corner of the room, glancing deliberately at me as he spoke. This is genuine love, something people born into wealth like Fang Taichu could never comprehend. Her worth isn't measured by exam scores or family fortune, unlike some people who exist only on their parents' money. The jab landed loud and clear, and every student's gaze swiveled to my position by the doorway. I could read the mixed judgment in their stares. Pity, faint disdain, quiet schadenfreude. They'd all bought the public narrative. Zhou Rongqi was the hardworking underdog choosing love over status, while I was a spoiled, empty rich girl who'd never known real struggle or affection. Jiang Ximin piped up then, her voice soft and delicate, the classic martyr act she perfected over 2 lifetimes. Rongqi, don't speak harshly of Fang Taichu. She doesn't understand our bond, that's all. Minmin, you're too kind, Zhou Rongqi cooed, his tone softening instantly before hardening again as he refocused on me. People who only value material gain live hollow, meaningless lives, even if they live to 100 years old. I leaned against the doorframe, processing his words without a flicker of hurt, running through 80 years of memories to unpack exactly why his statement was so absurd. My days have been filled with travel, art, live music, close friends, and endless personal freedom. No mandatory corporate work, no toxic emotional obligations, no sacrifice of my own wants for anyone else. I never felt hollow for a single second of my long life. Zhou Rongqi, on the other hand, had spent 8 decades trapped under the Fang Group contract, forced to maintain a flawless public persona as my husband while secretly draining company funds to cover Jiang Ximin's medical bills and frivolous wants. He'd never owned a single property, never held $1 of independent income, and every grand business when he'd claimed as his own only existed because my father handed him fully funded projects with pre-negotiated investor contacts. His entire identity was a construct built on my family's resources, yet he'd spent his whole life convincing himself he'd earned every bit of his success through raw talent alone. That delusion was the core of every terrible decision he made this second lifetime. He truly believed his past achievements were innate, not gifted, and that cutting off Fang's support would barely slow his ascent. His motivation for abandoning Tsinghua and Peking was twofold. First, he wanted to prove to Jiang Ximin his love was unconditional, a grand romantic gesture to make up for hiding her as a secret lover for 80 years. Second, he craved to break free from the control he thought my family held over him, blind to the fact that all the control was simply the safety net that had allowed him to thrive. He couldn't separate the opportunities Fang gave him from his own skill set, so he assumed he could replicate all his past corporate victories without a single ounce of external backing. Jiang Ximin's quiet performance had its own layered motivation for 2 lifetimes, she'd envied the stability and luxury I'd taken for granted. She'd grown up impoverished alongside Zhou Rongqi, watching him climb into wealth alongside me, and spent our first life resenting the secondary, hidden role she'd been forced into. When Zhou Rongqi announced he'd reject elite universities for her, she immediately saw a chance to claim the primary spot in his life, free from the shadow of my wealth and legal marriage. Her soft, apologetic words toward me were a calculated show of virtue to make the class side with her over the cruel, rich rival. I pushed off the doorframe, stepping forward into the classroom, all eyes locking onto me. The teacher cut off his frantic attempts to talk Zhou Rongqi down, turning to me in confusion. With all due respect, sir, I said, projecting my voice so every student could hear clearly, we should respect Zhou Rongqi's fully thought-out decision. Sacrificing 2 top university spots for love is such a moving display of loyalty. We ought to organize a class farewell dinner to celebrate their commitment. Dead silence fell over the room again. Zhou Rongqi's smug expression faltered, caught off guard by my lack of tears or anger. Jiang Ximin's simulated sadness flickered, too. Neither of them had prepared for me to openly validate his grand gesture instead of crumbling from embarrassment. After all, I continued, grinning faintly, he's convinced talent can shine anywhere, no matter the school's ranking. We should all cheer them on for their brave choice. I grabbed my backpack off the windowsill and walked straight out of the classroom, ignoring Zhou Rongqi's venomous shout about how I'd watch him build an empire without Fang family support. I waved a hand over my shoulder without glancing back, tossing out a casual reply. Looking forward to watching it unfold. First, though, maybe figure out how you'll afford your next meal without our funding. I rounded the corner of the hallway, spotting my family's black sedan idling at the school gate, our longtime driver Wang waiting beside the open passenger door. Before I could step outside, a faint, unfamiliar voice brushed the edge of my hearing, a quiet observation from a group of students lingering by the water fountain. Did you catch how he talked down to Fang Taichu like she's worthless, but all his money and connections come straight from her dad's company? He's acting like he's some self-made hero, but he's just a kept man throwing away his golden ticket over a girl who's clearly using his status. A second student chimed in, quieter still, a detail that planted the first seed of my major plot twist later in the timeline. You think Jiang Ximin's actually all that devoted? I saw her slip a luxury hair clip Zhou Rongqi gave her into her bag yesterday, then complained to her roommate that she's tired of waiting for him to fully provide for her. She's just riding his provincial champion fame right now. I filed that small comment away in the back of my mind, climbing into the back seat of the car. Wang pulled away from the curb smoothly, glancing at me through the rear view mirror. Everything go as you expected, young miss? Better than expected. I laughed, scrolling through the bank alert my father's finance team had sent to my phone, confirming every single one of Zhou Rongqi's attached accounts had been fully frozen and emptied within minutes of my phone call. He just publicly rejected Tsinghua and peeking to follow Jiang Zemin to a community college, then hosted a whole classroom speech about how he'll surpass our family without any of our help. My father's text popped up seconds later, short and blunt. His pride will dismantle him faster than any intervention we could stage. Do not interfere with his choices. Let every consequence land on his own shoulders. I locked my phone screen, staring out the window at the passing storefronts, already mapping out exactly how Zhou Rongqi's delusional grand plan would collapse piece by piece. What I hadn't anticipated yet, the twist waiting to unravel in Chapter 2, was that Zhou Rongqi's first attempt to prove his wealth to the entire class would land him in a humiliating public financial disaster, one that would force the school principal to step in and bail him out with his own future champion bonus, all gone in a single night of reckless spending he couldn't possibly afford. The chapter closes with a quiet internal realization that reshapes my entire perspective on the conflict ahead. I'd initially thought Zhou Rongqi's downfall would stem purely from losing Fang's financial support, but the small student gossip about Jiang Zemin's hidden resentment revealed a far bigger, self-sabotaging flaw in their so-called eternal love. Their relationship wasn't built on devotion. It was built on mutual greed, and that greed would tear them apart long before Zhou Rongqi ever ran out of money. By 7 that evening, I traded my school uniform for a simple silk sundress, left the villa, and ridden Wang straight to the Royal Court Hotel. The second I stepped into the third-floor banquet hall, I could feel every pair of eyes lock onto me. Zhou Rongqi had booked the largest private suite in the entire venue, 3 full round tables crammed with our 40-some classmates, crystal chandeliers hanging overhead, silver tableware glinting under warm overhead light. He sat front and center at the head table, Jiang Zemin glued to his side, her hand wrapped tight around his bicep like a physical claim to his newly minted provincial champion status. I spotted a cluster of my old friends waving me over to their smaller side table and slid into an empty chair without hesitation. Zhou Rongqi caught my movement instantly, his lips curling into a sneer, and he pushed himself upright to address the whole room, glass of sparkling water raised high like he was headlining a corporate gala instead of a high school student with 0 accessible funds. Thank you all for showing up tonight, he projected, voice booming over the chatter. This dinner marks 2 things, celebrating my provincial top score and a farewell to the life dictated by other people's money and expectations. True value isn't handed to you by wealthy families, it's forged by the choices you're brave enough to make. His gaze drifted directly to my seat, the dig unmissable to everyone present. A handful of classmates shot me pity, awkward glances, waiting for me to snap back or shrink away. I simply lifted my water glass, took a slow sip, and rested my elbow on the table, completely unbothered. Zhou Rongqi's confidence only swelled when I didn't react. He snapped his fingers to summon the hotel server holding the leather-bound wine and food menu, flipping through the pages with dramatic, practiced flourishes he picked up over 80 years of dining on Fang Group's dime. He rattled off premium dishes one after another without a single glance at the price tags, naming Australian lobster, spotted grouper cooked in steam, black truffle abalone, foie gras lamb chops, and 2 bottles of vintage 2005 Lafite red wine. The server's pen stalled mid-scroll, his jaw tightening with quiet panic. A boy sitting near Zhou Rongqi leaned in and whispered a nervous question about the total cost, but Zhou Rongqi waved the worry off like it was trivial pocket change. Nothing but loose change, he shrugged, glancing fondly down at Jiang Zemin pressed against his shoulder. Eat and drink your fill. No need to hold back for my sake. Jiang Zemin giggled softly, leaning her head against his shoulder, her eyes darting greedily across the platters of luxury food being wheeled out from the kitchen. Every time a new dish hit the table, she'd snap photos for her social media feed, completely oblivious to the financial ticking bomb ticking down on them. Wine flowed fast as the night wore on, and Zhou Rongqi's speeches grew longer, more unhinged by the minute. He rambled about building a self-made business empire, about leaving Fang's suffocating wealth far behind, about gifting Jiang Zemin every luxury I'd ever owned by the end of the year. Half the room hung on his every word, swept up in his dramatic rags to riches fantasy. The other half whispered quietly between themselves, confused about how a formerly fully funded poor student could afford a banquet this lavish all on his own. I listened to all of it, picking apart every flaw in his logic as I chewed through a piece of abalone. His entire business blueprint only existed because he'd lived 80 years inside my father's corporate network. Every investor contact, every market trend, every profitable industry pivot he planned to chase was knowledge gifted to him exclusively by Fang Group's endless resources. Strip away my family's money and connections, and he was nothing more than an 18-year-old kid with good exam scores and a mountain of unchecked arrogance. The atmosphere shifted on a dime when the server reappeared, white receipt folder clutched tight in his hands, and stepped up to Zhou Rongqi's chair. The hum of conversation faded instantly, every head turning toward the main table. Sir, would you like to settle the bill now? Zhou Rongqi waved a dismissive hand, pulling his wallet from the inner pocket of his jacket with a smooth, automatic motion he'd repeated thousands of times in our first life. He pulled out the black supplementary bank card my father had issued him back in high school, pinching it between 2 fingers and sliding it across the table to the server without a second thought. The machine buzzed once, then blared a sharp, rejecting beep that cut through the silent room. Excuse me, sir, the server said, voice stiff with embarrassment. This card has been fully frozen. The transaction cannot process. Zhou Rongqi's easy smile faltered for the first time all night. He frowned, taking a second debit card out of his wallet and handing it over. The machine whirred again, only to spit the card back out with another error alert. Insufficient account balance on this one as well. Color drained completely from Zhou Rongqi's face. He tore through every pocket of his uniform, dumping loose change and a few crumpled cash bills onto the tabletop, scrolling frantically through his banking app on his phone. I watched his features twist from mild confusion to shock, then pure, cold terror as he realized every single Fong-owned account had been emptied and locked down hours earlier, exactly after my phone call to my father at school. The quiet whispers in the room exploded into loud, unmissable murmurs. Everyone knew the full truth now. Zhou Rongqi's entire ability to splurge came from my family's funding he'd just thrown away by cutting all ties with me that afternoon. Jiang Ximin's soft, affectionate expression curdled into sharp panic. She tugged hard at his sleeve, voice rising into a shrill whine that echoed across the banquet hall. Rongqi, what's going on? Why won't the cards work? Tell me quickly. Zhou Rongqi ignored her, his knuckles white around his phone, staring blankly at the zero balances blinking back at him on every screen. Before he could fumble together a single excuse, our school principal pushed through the banquet doors, spotting the tense standoff instantly and hurrying over to defuse the disaster. He clapped a heavy hand on Zhou Rongqi's shoulder, his tone heavy with weary disappointment. I heard the commotion out front. Let me handle this tab. The school set aside a 200,000 yuan bonus for our provincial top scorer, and this single dinner ran up a total of 198,000. We'll deduct the full amount from your future prize payout up front. A collective gasp rippled through every table. Zhou Rongqi's grand victory celebration had eaten nearly his entire official reward before he'd even received a cent of it. He stood rigid, jaw clenched tight, unable to utter a single word of protest, as the principal swiped his personal credit card to cover the massive bill. I sat back and watched Zhou Rongqi's composure shatter entirely, dissecting exactly why he'd walked straight into this humiliating trap, layer by layer of his own warped psychology. First, his core motivation for booking the banquet was ego restoration. Earlier that afternoon, I'd undermined his big classroom speech by cheerfully supporting his choice to abandon elite universities for Jiang Ximin. He'd lost the power dynamic he'd spent 80 years perfecting, the dynamic where I was the heartbroken, jealous rich girl begging for his attention. This fancy dinner was his attempt to regain that upper hand, to prove to the whole class he held independent wealth and status without Feng's backing, to rub his supposed success in my face. Every expensive dish, every bottle of high-end wine, every boastful speech was a performance meant to make me regret letting him go. Second, he operated under a catastrophic delusion of unchanged financial access. His 80 years of living off Feng's unlimited funds rewired his brain to assume his cards would always have endless money available. He never once considered my father would immediately revoke all financial privileges the second he voided our arranged engagement. In his mind, Feng's resources were a permanent, unearned entitlement owed to him for all the hard work he'd put into running our family's business in our past life. He couldn't separate the contractual agreement tied directly to our marriage from his own personal worth, so the sudden loss of funding hit him like a complete, unforeseen betrayal. Jiang Ximin's reaction laid bare her own hidden motives too. She'd spent the whole night preening off Zhou Rongqi's display of wealth, secretly relishing the envy from every other girl in the room. The second the cards failed, her gentle, devoted sweetheart act vanished, replaced by raw panic over losing the comfortable, lavish lifestyle she'd already begun to imagine for herself. She didn't care about Zhou Rongqi's embarrassment. She cared that her shortcut to luxury had vanished in front of the whole class, and she was terrified of sliding back into the poverty she'd spent 2 lifetimes resenting. For me, watching all of this unfold triggered zero pity, only quiet, cold clarity. I'd spent 80 years tolerating his secret affair with her, letting him siphon our family's money to keep her comfortable, and I'd never once thrown his mistakes in his face. Now that he'd chosen to walk away of his own free will, every consequence was self-inflicted. I felt no anger, no sadness, only detached amusement, like watching a character in a poorly written drama dig their own grave one reckless decision at a time. The only faint flicker of surprise I felt was how quickly his self-assured hero persona crumbled the second the safety net vanished, proving every bit of his supposed self-reliance was a hollow facade. Once the principal finalized payment, the banquet fell apart instantly. Classmates filed out in small groups, muttering openly about Zhou Rongqi's reckless stupidity, their earlier admiration fully evaporated. The romantic, brave underdog narrative he'd spent hours building collapsed entirely, replaced by a new reputation, a delusional poor kid who blew his future scholarship bonus on a meaningless power play against a wealthy girl who didn't even care about him. I grabbed my bag and headed for the hotel exit, stepping out into the warm evening air before Zhou Rongqi could block my path. Sure enough, he caught up to me at the front sidewalk, Jiang Ximin trailing a half step behind him, both their faces dark with unbridled resentment. You ordered my father to freeze every card, didn't you? Zhou Rongqi snarled, stepping into my path to block my walk to the car, his voice low and sharp enough to cut. This was all a petty revenge scheme to humiliate me in front of our entire class. I stuffed both hands into the pockets of my sundress, tilting my head to stare at him blankly. You spent the whole day bragging you'd rely solely on your own hard work from now on. Why are you upset that we cut off the handouts you claimed you never needed? His mouth opened and shut, no retort ready to counter my simple question. Jiang Ximin tugged at his sleeve, her tone artificially soothing, though her eyes burned with undisguised malice toward me. Rongqi, don't waste your energy on her. She's just bitter and jealous because you chose me over her. We don't need her family's money to build a good life together. Zhou Rongqi nodded hard, refueling his anger and arrogance despite the fresh humiliation still clinging to him. He leaned in, pointing a finger directly at my chest, his voice thick with vengeful promise. Mark my words, Feng Taichu. This embarrassment is temporary. Within 3 months, I'll build a successful business bigger than Feng Group ever dreamed of. You'll end up begging me to take you back, and I'll turn you down without a second thought. I laughed outright at his empty threat, glancing past him at Jiang Zemin, who'd gone quiet, her eyes darting to the street like she was already mentally calculating how they'd afford rent and meals for the coming weeks. A tiny, pivotal detail caught my eye as I watched her shift uncomfortably. She discreetly pulled out her phone and sent a quick text to an unknown contact, her expression tight and anxious as she waited for a reply. I couldn't read the message, but the split-second flash of guilt on her face planted a critical piece of foreshadowing I wouldn't fully unpack until later chapters. Jiang Zemin already had a backup plan waiting in the wings. A wealthy stranger she'd been quietly messaging behind Zhou Rongqi's back long before the banquet disaster even unfolded. I waved a hand dismissively at Zhou Rongqi's dramatic bow, stepping around him to head for Wang's waiting sedan. Go ahead and chase that dream of yours. But keep one thing in mind. Your entire 200,000 yuan bonus is gone already, spent on tonight's feast. You'd better figure out how to cover basic food costs before you start planning to rival my family's corporation. Want me to spot you a few hundred for instant noodles if you're short on cash? The jab landed perfectly. Zhou Rongqi's face flushed deep purple, his fists clenched at his sides, while Jiang Zemin let out a sharp, frustrated huff, glaring daggers at my retreating back. I slid into the back seat of the car, Wang closing the passenger door gently behind me, and we pulled away from the hotel curb. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Zhou Rongqi and Jiang Zemin stand frozen on the sidewalk, heads bowed together as they stared at their phones, scrolling through bank balances and loan applications in a desperate scramble to fix the financial mess he created single-handedly. Wang's eyes flicked up to meet mine in the mirror as he merged onto the main road. Shall we head straight back to the villa, young miss? Absolutely, I nodded, pulling out my phone to shoot my father a quick text updating him on the banquet's spectacular collapse. I've got plenty to tell him about tonight's performance art show. My father's reply popped up less than 10 seconds later, concise and unemotional as always. His ego will drive him to borrow recklessly next. Do not intervene in any loans or debts he accumulates. Allow every consequence to unfold naturally. I locked my phone screen and leaned back against the soft leather seat, staring out the window at the city's streetlights blurring past. I thought Zhou Rongqi's first major failure would calm his delusions, force him to acknowledge how dependent he'd always been on Fang's support. But watching his fiery, unbroken rage at me instead of at his own terrible choices, I realized he'd only doubled down on reckless, impulsive decisions to prove his non-existent independence. The next catastrophe was already brewing, and I knew exactly what he'd waste his last borrowed money on, an over-the-top luxury vacation for Jiang Zemin, funded entirely by predatory high-interest online loans. The chapter ends with a quiet internal realization that amplifies all future conflict. Zhou Rongqi's pride isn't just a flaw, it's an addiction. Every time he suffers a loss, he'll burn more borrowed cash on grand romantic gestures to compensate for his wounded ego, digging himself deeper into debt with no way to climb back out. Worse still, Jiang Zemin's secret text earlier proved her loyalty to him was paper-thin, ready to tear at the seams the second his ability to shower her with luxury evaporated entirely. Word spread across the school overnight about the banquet fiasco. By Monday morning, every student lingered in hallways dissecting Zhou Rongqi's spectacular blunder, the 198,000 yuan dinner draining his full provincial scholarship bonus before it even hit his bank account. The romantic underdog narrative he'd manufactured crumbled completely, split into two polarizing factions of classmates. A tiny handful still hailed him as a fearless romantic who'd sacrifice everything for love. The vast majority whispered that he was recklessly delusional, tossing once-in-a-lifetime opportunities for a fleeting teenage crush. Zhou Rongqi didn't register the sideways glances or quiet mockery swirling around him. Humiliation from the hotel bill had stoked his ego into a white-hot frenzy, amplifying his delusion that 80 years of corporate success was purely his natural talent, not a gift from my family's endless resources. His sole fixation became proving to everyone, especially me, that he could deliver the lavish life Jiang Zemin craved without a single cent of Fang's backing. His first move was scrambling to scrape together liquid capital. He marched straight to the school administration office, begging staff to advance whatever small remainder of the champion bonus hadn't been seized by the principal. The school only released a meager 30,000 yuan leftover stipend, a fraction of the original reward. Next, he hit up every male classmate he'd ever shared a meal with, begging personal loans of 2,000 to 5,000 yuan apiece. Most caved, swayed by his provincial top scorer status and dramatic speeches about future business windfalls that would repay them tenfold within months. All told, he scraped together barely 30,000 more in private student loans, stacking his debt higher before he even had a plan to earn income. Still short on cash for the grand gesture he'd mapped out to win back public admiration, he turned to predatory online lending platforms. He downloaded half a dozen high-interest loan apps in the dorm bathroom after curfew, skipping over pages of compound interest fine print without a single glance, signing every digital agreement instantly. The second the funds hit his temporary payment card, he booked 2 first-class round-trip flights to Lijiang, 28,000 yuan per ticket, totaling 56,000 just for airfare. The borrowed student cash plus predatory loan barely covered the flight tab alone, leaving zero leftover money for accommodation, meals, or daily living expenses. A girl in my homeroom who shared a dorm floor with Zhou Rongqi tracked me down between classes, her voice laced with stunned disbelief as she spilled every detail of his plan. She'd overheard him ranting to his dorm mates about the trip, bragging that he'd give Jiang Zemin a 10-day luxury mountain escape to erase the embarrassment of the hotel banquet. He took out loan shark's money just to buy first-class plane tickets, she said, shaking her head. Our head teacher cornered him yesterday, practically begged him to cancel the booking. He told the teacher travel builds business vision, that textbook education is meaningless next to real-world experience. The teacher left his dorm red-faced, yelling that he'd crash and burn once repayment dates hit. I leaned against the windowsill, scrolling through my phone while she rambled, barely holding back laughter at the sheer absurdity of his logic. His motivation for the trip was layered deeper than surface-level romance. First, he needed a flashy social media spectacle to erase the viral school gossip about his unpaid banquet tab. Posting glamorous travel photos with Jiang Zemin would rebuild his image as a powerful, capable man who could spoil his lover regardless of minor setbacks. Second, he clung to the memory of our first lifetime, where I'd funded endless international vacations for the two of us. He believed replicating that luxury trip, even on borrowed, high-interest cash, would prove he no longer relied on my family to provide joy for the woman he loved. Third, he needed to convince Jiang Zemin he could still deliver the lavish lifestyle she craved, silencing the quiet anxiety she'd hidden after the card freeze disaster at the hotel. Jiang Zemin's own motivation for embracing the expensive trip was equally transparent to me. She'd spent 2 lifetimes watching Zhou Rongqi shower me with luxury funded by Fong Group, and the banquet collapse had shattered her illusion that she'd immediately step into my place as a wealthy man's primary partner. The Lijiang getaway was tangible proof that Zhou Rongqi still prioritized her above all else, validation she'd been craving since the day we both rebirthed. Every fancy meal, high-end resort villa, and professional travel photo shoot would give her content to post online, broadcasting her status as Zhou Rongqi's beloved partner to all our classmates and hometown relatives. That evening, Zhou Rongqi posted his first travel announcement to our class WeChat group, paired with photos of the 2 first-class boarding passes and complimentary airport champagne flutes from the airline lounge. His caption dripped with self-righteous grandeur. Youth waits for no one. Money can be earned back 100 times over, but genuine love and freedom are irreplaceable. New chapter. Lijiang. Every destination ahead belongs to us. Jiang Zemin replied within 10 seconds, a gushing comment full of heart emojis promising to explore the world side by side with him. The group's initial wave of jealous praise faded fast. Within hours, private side chats erupted with classmates questioning how he planned to pay back the sky-high loan interest piling up daily. No one dared comment those doubts publicly, afraid of triggering another dramatic speech from Zhou Rongqi. I forwarded the screenshot of his post straight to my father, who sat in our villa's home office scrolling financial reports when I wandered down with a fruit platter. He glanced at the phone screen for 2 seconds before setting it aside, his tone flat and unimpressed. Foolish. He's used to instant, unlimited capital handed to him without consequence, so he cannot conceptualize compound interest or debt repayment timelines. Let him burn through every borrowed cent. We will not step into cushion any fallout. I popped a cube of honeydew melon into my mouth, grinning at his blunt assessment. Don't be too harsh, Dad. He thinks this is bold, forward-thinking living. You're just a corporate tycoon stuck in rigid profit and loss logic, unable to appreciate youthful romantic grand gestures. My father shot me a dry, knowing stare, sipping his aged tea slowly. You enjoy watching him unravel far too much. Keep your distance. Do not offer aid. Do not provoke him directly. Let his own choices dismantle every illusion he holds. I nodded, heading back up to my bedroom, already curious what fresh mess awaited them once their 10-day mountain vacation wrapped up. 10 days later, Zhou Rongqi and Jiang Zemin returned to town, their social media feeds flooded with non-stop 9-grid photo dumps documenting every second of their escape. The pair booked the most exclusive private mountain villa resort in Lijiang, costing 3,800 yuan per night, splurged on private horseback tours, professional couple travel photo shoots, multi-course candlelit dinners with imported wine, and handcrafted luxury souvenirs for Jiang Zemin to take back to her hometown. By my rough tally, the entire 10-day trip racked up nearly 200,000 yuan in total expenses, all sourced from predatory loans and the remainder of his seized scholarship bonus. Jiang Zemin's feed was the textbook definition of performative romance. Every photo featured her clinging to Zhou Rongqi's arm, soft filtered sunset shots, close-ups of expensive wine glasses and flower bouquets, captions romanticizing their hard-won peaceful escape away from materialistic pressure. Zhou Rongqi reposted every single one to the class group, tacking on long philosophical paragraphs about breaking free from societal definitions of success and wealth. The class chat's energies shifted entirely after their return. The initial envy evaporated into quiet exhaustion and muted judgment. Students no longer commented positively. Most ignored the posts entirely, only venting their confusion in separate private message threads. Multiple classmates who'd lent him personal cash began sending gentle repayment reminders, messages Zhou Rongqi ignored without a single reply. When school opened for volunteer college major registration a week later, the head teacher pulled Zhou Rongqi aside for one final, desperate attempt to reason with him. The Tsinghua and Peking University admissions teams had kept his reserved spot open as a last chance, willing to overlook his earlier dramatic refusal if he reversed course before the national registration deadline. The teacher laid out every advantage of the top-tier universities, full lifetime academic support, industry internship pipelines, elite alumni networks that would guarantee career success regardless of background. Zhou Rongqi shut the conversation down instantly, his posture stiff and unyielding in front of the entire registration crowd gathered around the classroom desks. Degrees are just paper barriers designed to trap ordinary people into boring, pre-planned careers. I do not need a prestigious university to build my empire. Wherever Minmin enrolls, I will follow without hesitation. He turned to grip Jiang Zemin's hand tightly, his voice softening into a dramatic vow meant for every listening ear. I spent 80 lifetimes shortchanging you, Minmin. This rebirth is my chance to repay every hardship you endured by my side. I will never let you struggle for a single day ever again. Jiang Zemin's eyes glistened with manufactured tears, leaning into his shoulder as if overwhelmed by his devotion. The surrounding students stared on, half mesmerized by his theatrical display, half cringing at his blatant self-sabotage. I lingered by the classroom doorway, unpacking the tangled web of motivations driving both characters' reckless choices, untangling their hidden fears beneath the flowery romantic rhetoric they paraded publicly. For Zhou Rongji, every impulsive financial decision stemmed from a toxic cocktail of repressed inferiority and inflated ego. Deep down, he'd never escaped the childhood trauma of growing up impoverished, watching peers with stable family wealth live without constant money stress. 80 years of relying on my family's fortune masked that core insecurity. He mistook the power Fong's resources granted him for inherent personal brilliance. Reborn without that safety net, every small sign of financial limitation triggered crippling feelings of inadequacy. Lavish trips, expensive banquets, and grand public declarations were his defense mechanism, spending borrowed money to manufacture a facade of wealth that quieted his inner fear of being poor again. His refusal to accept Tsinghua or peeking had a secondary hidden motive he never admitted aloud, resentment toward me and my family's control. Attending either elite school would mean accepting the educational opportunities my father had paved the way for him to access in our original timeline. Rejecting them entirely was a symbolic middle finger to the life my family had crafted for him, a way to claim complete autonomy, even if that autonomy led directly to crippling debt and a dead-end private college degree. Jiang Ximin's loyalty was far more conditional than Zhou Rongqi's delusional worldview allowed him to see. She loved the status that came with dating a provincial top scorer who spoiled her with luxury trips and gifts, but she held zero willingness to endure long-term poverty alongside him. The Lijiang vacation was a temporary reprieve for her, a chance to live the wealthy lifestyle she'd envied me for 2 lifetimes. Behind closed doors, she'd already begun stressing over the looming loan repayment deadlines Zhou Rongqi refused to acknowledge, silently resenting the mounting debt that threatened to strip away the fleeting comfort she'd tasted during their getaway. The soft, loyal sweetheart persona she performed in public was a mask. Privately, she'd begun mentally weighing alternative paths to financial security if Zhou Rongqi's promised business success never materialized. As for my own internal emotional shift, watching them sink deeper into self-created financial ruin stirred zero sympathy within me. I'd spent 80 years tolerating Zhou Rongqi's secret affair, quietly funding Jiang Ximin's medical care and daily comfort without complaint. I never once sabotaged their relationship or withheld resources out of malice in our first life. This time around, every hardship they faced was self-inflicted, a direct consequence of Zhou Rongqi voluntarily cutting ties with Fong's support to prioritize his white moonlight. I felt no rage, no sadness, only detached, cold curiosity, observing how quickly his grand vision of self-made success would crumble once loan collectors began hounding them daily. The only faint flicker of surprise I felt was how willingly Jiang Ximin ignored the mountain of accumulating debt, choosing to live in the moment of luxury rather than address the inevitable financial collapse racing toward them. Once the registration session wrapped up, Zhou Rongqi officially submitted his college application to the same low-ranking private junior college Jiang Ximin had selected, a school with sky-high annual tuition and abysmal graduate employment rates. The second he finished writing the school's name on the form, he spotted me lingering by the exit and marched over, Jiang Ximin trailing close behind him. He stopped directly in front of me, golden sunset light spilling through the classroom windows behind him, his expression radiating unshakable, misplaced confidence. "You've spent every day since school release waiting to laugh at my missteps, Fong Taichu," he said, chin tilted upward in arrogant defiance, "but your mockery is meaningless. I'm building a life entirely on my own merit, and within 3 months, I'll stand higher than your entire family's corporate empire. You'll regret writing me off so easily." Jiang Ximin stepped forward beside him, adding her own thinly veiled jab, her voice sugary sweet yet sharp underneath. "Don't underestimate Rongqi's potential, Fong Taichu. He's destined for extraordinary success, and one day you'll watch from the sidelines wishing you'd never let him go." I tilted my head, glancing between their tense, determined faces, then gestured loosely toward his phone tucked in his pocket. "All that destiny talk sounds lovely. Just a quick question. Have you calculated how much interest is stacking up on those online loans you took out for the Lijiang first-class tickets and resort villa? The repayment date's only 2 weeks away, after all." Zhou Rongqi's confident smirk froze instantly, a flicker of panic darting across his features before he masked it with a scowl. "My financial affairs are none of your concern. I'll resolve every debt without your family's interference." "Fair enough," I shrugged, stepping around them to head for my family